So our speaker is going to be Amber Lappin, and I will read a bio for her. Amber has worked in the early childhood and children's ministry fields for 25 years. Currently, she consults and teaches at schools, churches, and parenting groups across the country. She's also an associate professor at her local college. Amber has a BS in human development, a master's degree in early childhood education, and a heart for equipping and encouraging mommies everywhere. So if we could all please welcome up Amber Lappin. It's bright, I'm sorry.
This.
Oh, you got it, I do.
Should be good. Oh, there we are. Hi. It is very bright. I will just go in faith that you're out there. Hi, my name is Amber Lappin, like she said. I have a special heart for moms of littles, mostly because I am a survivor. I have 3 grown children. My son Spencer is 23, and he's actually the age I was when I had him, which is weird. And he works for the Long Beach Fire Department. And my girls are in their 2nd year at Cal Baptist. They are 19 now. And I remember speaking to this particular group when they were just little tinies. So I've been able to come back here a lot of times, which makes me happy. And they're actually the age I was when I got married, which is also kind of a trip because I can't even imagine giving my children advice to be married at that age. But somehow it worked out well for us because it's now been 27 years of marriage. And so I think that I can call myself I think I was told to stay on the carpet. I think I can call myself a survivor, a thriver, and very, very, very thankful for the time that I've had with my littles and now my bigs, who may someday have littles, we'll see. I have to say that the good news is that now that my children are grown up, I'm never tired. No, just kidding. I'm tired all the time. But I remember the first indicator that motherhood was going to be a little bit different than I anticipated when I was originally expecting. And I found that tired that I had never, ever felt. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Like that. And then I was twice as tired the second time because I had the twins. And I was so tired, and I just could not believe how tired a person could possibly be. And everybody kept telling me this weird word, rest. Has anybody heard this? You should rest. Which was hilarious when you're pregnant because the peeing and the moving. And, when you've got 2, you've got the whole WWF thing happening. And then there's and then when they're tiny, they're either sleeping or you're worried that they're sleeping too much. And then when they're even bigger, there's all the interruptions and I think I may have even shared with you before that horrible way of waking up when somebody's just this close to your face. Does this ever happen to you before? Like you wake up because you can feel eyes on you? And I remember I went to the doctor. I had gotten sick for like the 87th time, and my oldest was in preschool, and I had the twins. And he said, really, you don't need anything. You just need rest. And I remember laughing like, can you not amputate something that sounds easier than getting rest? Can you hospitalize me? Maybe then I could get some rest. And I just equate that time of my life is almost like a blur, this time when they're tiny, because rest just seems like this ridiculous thing. It's like he might as well have said, go out and get a unicorn and then go and, paint it purple. Like nothing. It had nothing that I could do. And I kept getting that advice, sleep when the baby sleeps. Did anybody get that one? Is anybody really great at that? Because either you have no choice and you just pass out when the baby sleeps, or this thing starts going in your head of all the things that should probably be done, like bathing yourself or eating something or cleaning something. It was the first time I realized, and prepare to judge me, and I'm fine with that, when I realized that things can grow in your sink if you don't take care of your dishes fast enough. Or every once in a while, I would just do this game of like trying to pick up all the diapers I had left everywhere. I was getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and this idea of rest was really becoming so elusive that I was starting to go a little crazy. And I remember one night I woke up and I heard a baby crying, and I stumbled in and picked the baby up and sat in my chair and just started nursing her. And then I realized a few seconds into it, I'm still hearing the same cry from across the room. Because I woke up the sleeping baby who was like, oh yeah, I'd love to nurse right now. Man. And I remember just sitting there just crying, and my husband saying, what can I do for you? And I'm like, there's nothing anyone can do. Anybody ever feel like this? We get this burden, right? This burden, this heavy, heavy, heavy laden feeling where we feel like we can't even stand up anymore. And we start doing ridiculous, ridiculous things, and we find out, like, even after the children fall asleep, we're still watching whatever they were watching. Anybody catch themselves doing that? Or everybody's asleep in your car, and you're still singing along to whoever the kids were listening to. And that burden of, first of all, responsibility. Name some things that you have to do in your house or nobody will ever do. Make food. Laundry. Dishes, groceries, clean the bathrooms, change the sheets, change diapers. I am 100% convinced that if I were to, heaven forbid, have passed away while my children were small, from that day to this, the sheets would never have been changed. Right? Unless there were, some catastrophic thing happening. Sheets, also like picture day, my poor children. They would have been nobody would have cared about picture day. What else? Does anybody else, and your children maybe aren't old enough to make you completely crazy on this yet, but does anybody else have an entire family of people who cannot put the toilet paper on the spool? They put it on top? Like, it's right there, people. I have had classes, like in service, everybody in the bathroom. I'm going to show you one more time. I get that you are 20, but clearly, I noticed when I visited the girls' dorms, their toilet paper was on the roll. They know how, they just don't. So you have all this responsibility, things that nobody else will do unless you do. And then there's not just that you're carrying around this certain amount of guilt. This idea that I should be doing more or I should be doing something else. Even in resting or being gone, you feel like, they wouldn't be crying if I just stayed. It would be fine if I just stayed. If I'm working, then they wouldn't be so messed up at school. If they wouldn't have gotten bitten, they wouldn't be biting. They wouldn't have done this, they wouldn't have done that if I was there. Or conversely, we feel like if we are home all the time, we're thinking they're not getting all the opportunities that they should have. Like if they were at school, they would know how to do this. We watch the other moms and our baby's, 6 months old, and we see somebody else's 6-month-old run across the room and read a book, and you're like, clearly I'm not doing this right. So we have this guilt and this pressure. And then on top of that, we have this these commitments. How many of you have commitments of things that you have said you would do beyond just caring for your children? Okay, so most of us have some other commitment of some sort. We said we would watch somebody else's children. If you're an at-home mom, you get asked a lot, can you watch my children since you're home? Like you're not doing anything. Oh, you're good. I was looking for something to take up all my time. Or if you are a good at something, anything, then people are always asking you to do it because you can. And it's really hard to say no. Does anybody else struggle with just me? I'm just the only person that has a hard time saying no to people. And so we find ourselves with these burdens. Not a lot of sleep. Not a lot of time to ourselves. We have these emotional burdens, these physical burdens, spiritual burdens, which are not even supposed to exist, right? But we have them. If I prayed more, if I did this more. And every self-help mommy book is written by this shiny-faced, hair-brushed, lips-glassed person who just has their house so perfect, and they have these routines and these schedules, and you know that you're failing, and then you get tireder. And so the picture of myself for a good part of the time my children were small was this. Like, well, part of me was so weary and tired and teary and emotional. And I remember one time my husband coming home, and at the time when I just had Spencer, he worked at Mervyn's. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was like Kohl's, but cheaper. And he was a Mervyn's manager, and he worked in the shoe department, which was very exciting, so I could have all my Elemento shoes. And because he worked retail, he was kind of a slave to life, right? And so he'd work these wacky shifts, and one time I was expecting him to come home at 5:30, let's say, and it was 5:28, and I was like, I just have to make it 2 more minutes. I only have to make it 2 more minutes. And then at 5:29, I'm like, okay, one more minute. 5:30, tick, nothing. By 5:35, I'm insane. Like, I've already gone 5 minutes past what I thought I could survive. And at 5:45, he calls and says, I'm going to be another half hour before I leave. Lost my business. I can't possibly. I don't know why you don't care about me and our children. I'm not going to make it, I just need to close. I just have to go to the bathroom. But there's some things that I discovered during that time. There's reasons why that time is actually, I can tell the stories laughing a little bit because I can see that it's a little funny. First of all, we survived, which is, nice. I remember looking around at other people who are like, they survived. What's wrong with me that I'm not making it? But at some point, I started using it as an encouragement. Like, well, all of these people in this room were allowed to survive past the age of 2. So I know that people can do this. What do I need to do? And the thing that I really needed to learn about was rest. It's a lesson I learned over and over and over again in every season of my life. I had to learn it over again when my children went to school, and I felt like, how many of you have children in school? Okay, so remember that feeling when you first were imagining all that time that they were in school, what you were going to do with that time? And you had felt like it was going to feel like a week every day, and instead it feels like 25 minutes max. Especially if you have other littles at home. But even after they all go, you get this feeling like, okay, this is it. This is when my life is going to change. And then you just take on more. And your expectations go up. And then you have to learn the lesson again. And then I had to learn the lesson when my children were old enough to leave on their own. I had to learn that lesson again. I had to learn the lesson. I'm learning the lesson right now with my little empty nest, which, by the way, does not suck. I was really nervous about it. I thought, I'm not going to make it because I really like my kids. I enjoy my people so much. Like, they are amazing people. But I eat whatever I want for dinner. And my husband is now trained, and we have the same kind of taste anyway. He never says, like, ew, what's that? Never. We just eat whatever we want. And then sometimes I'm like, well, it's 8 o'clock. I think I'm going to bed. I just do. It's fantastic. So you'd think that now I'm just going to be rested all the time, but it took a little while for me to learn how to, and it's taking me some more time, how to find the balance and not fill up that time again that I was looking forward to. So there's a few things. I think that, first of all, it's important to us to understand that God understands our need to rest. He gave us a Sabbath day. It's part of like one of the 10 commandments he gave us. One of them was to rest. Only 10 things he asked us to do, and one of them was rest. And later, when people are all up in a bunch about how to rest, how should we rest, Jesus is like, you guys get, like, rest was a gift for you. It's supposed to be great for you. It shouldn't be more of a burden. And for us, sometimes I think we need to pay attention to what does that mean? What does that mean of rest not being a burden? And do we ever look at it that way? Another thing that I noticed, and I was reading through the Bible, and I was listening to this story, and we're all pretty familiar with it, but I never caught this line before, so I'm going to read it to you really quick. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told them all they had done and taught. And then Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while. He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. Have you ever had that feeling before? I haven't even eaten. I remember, and this is way too much information, I get that, but I remember one time going to the bathroom after my husband came home, handing him 2 babies and pointing where the toddler was, going to the bathroom and looking at my underwear, and it was on inside out and backwards, and it was the first time I saw that since the morning, which means I had not gone to the bathroom in his 10 hours of being gone. Not good. And a lot of times he'd be like, why are you being so cranky? And I'm like, I don't think I ate anything today. I just ate what was left over or what they didn't want or a bite of this or whatever Cheerios they put in my mouth. Soggy Cheerios, aren't those the best? They're almost as good as soggy kisses. Ugh. But Jesus understood what that feeling was like, caring for needs so much that sometimes he didn't get to rest. That gives me 2 pieces of information. First of all, he understands what that feels like. Secondly, sometimes that's going to happen and you don't need to be ashamed of yourself, for sometimes it just got too busy. I didn't get to rest. I didn't get to do the thing. But what he does is he says, hey, let's go. Let's go away for a little while and let's rest. I love the feeling of what that must have felt like. Can you imagine? You've been working. You're like, oh my gosh, Jesus, look at all we did today. We woke up. We bathed. The children have eaten. I have read them 75 stories because I understand the first 5 years are so important. I have watched 87 episodes of whatever, Teletubbies, Wiggles, Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer, the Paw Patrol, the whole, I've watched it all. Everybody is dressed, nobody died. There is something in the crock pot. Can't really vouch for how great it's going to be, but it's in the crock pot. I've done all of these things, and then picturing Jesus saying, great, let's go away for a second and rest. I love that picture. I think that it's very funny because after that, it says, but many people recognized them and saw them leaving, and people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Of course they did. Is this not parenthood in a nutshell? But they had that time as they were going away, and I think you got to take the time where you can get it. And that idea of rest, when the children rest, sometimes that's practical, sometimes that's not. Sometimes you're going to have to find some more space. So there are a few different types of rest. First of all, we have to see, am I exhausted physically? So how many of you feel just physically exhausted right now this minute? A good part of you, yeah. You haven't been sleeping really well. You've been going really hard. And physically, if you sat down too long, you could just go nights. My kids, even still today, are like, we're going to put on a movie. Do you want a nap, Mom? Yeah. Because as soon as I watch the movie for just a few minutes, I'm like, I have all these great intentions. I get the popcorn, I get everything ready, and I'm gone, gone, gone. But physically, we get tired. There's some solutions for that. Some of them are just part of the early years. But if that is still happening, if you're still not getting a lot of sleep, there's some tips that I have. First of all, getting on a really good routine. I know we hear it all the time, so much that you're like, routine, the same way that we do, like, what if I want to lose weight? Diet and exercise, Eat less, move more. But honestly, how does it work? Eat less, move more, right? And it's true with getting on a bedtime routine. It just is. You have to get your children to bed at a normal time. My friend calls it putting her children away. Like, she'll say, okay, I can't talk right now. I've got to put my kids away. I'll be back in a minute. And I'm like, I love that idea, because they need to go where they go at sleep time. And a lot of times, and I remember this back in the Mervin's day, my son would just stay up because we had a wonky schedule. He'd stay up at all these weird hours. But then there would be times when I'd be begging him to go to sleep. I'd be like, what if I give you money? Like, but I'm not tired, Mommy. Or if I close my eyes, I won't be able to see you, Mom. That's the point, buddy. Let's go. When you get out of a routine, it's really, really hard for your children to be able to cope with life. So a lot of times people will say, well, how early should my children go to bed? Preschool age children should be to bed between 7 and 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock in the summertime. And I know some of you are like, what? Like 10 o'clock, we're still begging. 8 o'clock maybe, but honestly, they need the sleep for lots of reasons. This is the time when they're growing and developing. I could get all science nerdy on you, but let me just tell you that the way that God designed people's bodies to grow and develop is to do so while they're sleeping. So if they're not sleeping, they're not developing properly. You got to get them nights. Also, you're not developing properly if you're not having any time without small people needing things from you. You should be able to pee at least one time a day with nobody watching you or putting their fingers under the door. You should be able to just sit there till you're done. It's not healthy for your body to be holding it all day or to not be eating all day and to never have any headspace. Next, when you're putting your children to bed, if you have a routine of how to do it, a wind down time, it works better for them. In the same order, a bath. I'm not saying take notes. This is just whatever order works for you. But for us, it was a bath and jammies, teeth, and a story. Bath and jammies, and not 75 stories. You pick one book, I pick one book, I pick short books, they pick long books. That's how that works. We pray, night. And as the children got older, if they didn't want to go to sleep, they didn't have to go to sleep, but they had to stay in their bed because they were put away. And you're going to be in your space, I'm going to be in my space. And when the children got old enough to not need naps anymore, they still had to be in their room for a quiet time during the middle of the day. You are in your space, I'm in my space. This is just a half an hour, 30 minutes of just being in your room so I can breathe for a second. Because I felt on the edge all the time. And little tiny things would happen and I would cry. They'd spill something and I'd be like, oh my gosh. It's all right. We'll clean it up, But I couldn't do that because it was just 24 hours a day. You got to have a break. And another thing, and this seems counterintuitive, but waking your children up at the same time every day. I know that seems wicked and evil, and I'm not saying do that with tiny little infant babies who haven't slept all night. I'm talking about your regular weaned children. You don't want to be like, you got to wake your children at a regular time, get them up, and get them moving first thing in the morning. Here's why you want to do that, because eventually they'll start waking up at that exact time, and then you can wake up before them. This seems like a small thing, but waking up before people need you is wonderful. Even 15 minutes to go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, have coffee if that's your jam, read the Bible for just a couple of minutes, check in with God before you have people who need things from you. That little bit of margin will help you get the rest that you need, that routine. So physically, one of the things I would say is make sure that you're getting that you're getting sleep, that you're on a good routine for yourself, including, I know the worst thing, exercise, like moving your body every day. I understand we use up a lot of calories if you're a nursing mama or if you're chasing after small children, you use up a lot of calories, but like getting fresh air, stretching your limbs, doing just a walk around the block can do huge things again for and especially if you can do it at the same time every day, which is debatable, but if you can do that, getting your whole body relaxed so that it can sleep at night. You don't have a million things on your mind, which is what we'll talk about in a minute. The next thing I want to talk about is your emotional rest. The thing about being a mom today is that we care about everything. And I don't think this is a bad thing. I think my mom's generation, and this is not a slam on my mom, it was her entire parenting. Everybody did it this way. Like, they didn't care a lot about how the development of kids were happening. And I'm not saying that in a slam, but every summer, they did not care about having us scheduled with activities. The sun was up, we were awake, we were supposed to be outside and not allowed to come home until the street lights came on. Don't come home till dinner. They didn't even know what we ate for lunch, and I don't even remember, but I'm sure it couldn't have been good. There was no safety, anything. We had this rickety old metal park equipment, including, is anybody old enough to remember the merry-go-round, the metal merry-go-round of death? That thing at least had 2 or 3 cracks in it with shards of metal sticking on. And you would get one big kid who could just make that thing book, and you'd be holding on for dear life as your body was completely horizontal, spinning around into not wood chips, not recycled bark, not poured in place, but gravel. And if you let go, whoosh, our slides were made of pure metal, also with shards sticking up and screws sticking out. And it would be so stinking hot that you would, after the first time, learn you would slide down on your feet, not on your booty, because you would just for sure get 12th degree burns as you went down. Nobody was there watching. There was nobody, I don't remember anybody's parent going, take turns on the slide. They didn't have to, they didn't watch what we were watching. They didn't take us to all the different lessons. We might have had soccer or something, but generally we didn't have a lot. Our parents didn't have a lot of this burden, emotional burden, where they felt responsible all the time. Now, I'm not saying that was the right way either. I think that we could learn a thing or two, we all survived, kind of. But there's a lot of things that we missed, right? A lot of people, and I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people of my generation who had undiagnosed learning disabilities. Their life could have been a lot easier, or mental illnesses that they could have been identified early, and they would have been so much better off. There was a lot of hinky abuse sort of things happening, and nobody knew any better. So I'm not saying it was a better time, but it does tell us that this new way that we care about every bit of our children's development is probably going to change a little bit over generations too. I'm hoping that my children won't care as much as I worried. I remember, one time, because the girls are visibly identical. And so I would dress them in color-coded jammies so that I could know who was who. And I also painted their toenails as a backup plan, just in case. And one time, at the end of the day, I took off the pink pajamas, had been calling the pink one Carter all day long, took off her pajamas and out jumped the purple toes. And I knew that I had been calling Kenzie Carter all day. And I was like, I've ruined her. She doesn't know the difference. Oh my gosh. So I'm hoping my children will not be quite so wrapped around the axle all the time about worrying that they ruin their child. But I do think that we have this emotional burden, and I want to remind us a few things. First of all, part of the way that we keep that sanity under check is to have some girlfriends, to have people to share burdens with. And if we are honest with them, if we can say, oh my gosh, I opened up her pajamas and out dropped the purple toes and they laughed like you guys just did, then I can go, okay, this is not the end of the world. I need that check. Because if you're just thinking in your own head all day, that makes perfect sense. If you have a friend who's like, oh my gosh, you're so adorable, it's so fine, she'll be fine. You've got to worry about it when she's 18 if you don't know the difference, but right now it's okay. It was one day, she's 3 weeks old, she'll be all right. Giving each other that kind of thing, but you have to be able to be honest. If you have this burden to be perfect all the time, then you're not going to be able to keep that up for others, and you're not going to be able to keep that up for yourself, and you're going to have that emotional crisis all the time. You need to be able to have people who will just laugh with you, laugh at you a little bit if you need it. And I don't think that is the same as a person who lives in your house like a husband. I don't think that's the same, because if he laughs at me, right? Not remotely the same. You don't even know. You don't know anything about child development, It doesn't go well. But when a friend who is also holding a baby the same age as yours, or has had a child that grew up and can just say to you, it's all right. These things happen. Tomorrow's a new day. We'll do this again. I'll check on you tomorrow. Are you worried that it's going to happen again? No, it'll never happen again. Then don't worry about it. These are the things we need to do. We need to have perspective. We need to have people that we can lean on. And you need to be able to be super real. And a lot of times, what that means is finding somebody who you're identifying with and just say, you know what, I need somebody to be super real with, and I would love to be that person for you. Could we do that? And just establish that. From now on, if you hear me being ridiculous, then you can say to me, you're being ridiculous, and I'm going to try really hard not to be offended, and vice versa. And I had those people who would say to me, I'm trying to think of a different way to say it so that I don't out my friend. She said to me, I can't think of one way to do it. So, sorry, girlfriend. She said to me, I only let my kids chew gum in the car. I'm like, why? She said, so they won't get gum in their hair. So when they're strapped in their car seat, they're not moving around. It makes perfect sense. And I'm all, that doesn't make any sense at all. If they are walking with gum in their hair, if they're sitting in the car seat, they can still put gum in their hair. And she's like, well, my children have never had gum in their hair. And I'm like, neither have mine. They are able to sit in a chair with gum. I don't understand. But to her, it made perfect sense because she had only processed it to herself, right? But as soon as she said it, I'm like, that's weird. And she's like, no, is it weird? It's weird, right? It's weird. It doesn't make sense. This is what happens when we're left on our own, if we don't say things out loud. We get all wrapped up over something that doesn't matter or isn't even effective, right? And when you have that kind of relationship with somebody, when you can laugh about it years later, even on video, sorry, girlie, when you have that kind of relationship, you can laugh about it. You can go, is it weird? And we say, yeah, it's weird. And then you go, okay, now I'm not going to worry about that anymore. I was so worried about that thing, and it's not a thing. That's fantastic. These are the same friends who rallied around me when I was crying when my son said that he didn't want to go to a 4-year college. And everybody else is posting all these pictures of their kids with the acceptance letters and the pennants and the college sweatshirts. And my son had mono and was sleeping on the couch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, failure to launch. I ruined my kid. And she did that to me. She's like, oh my gosh, you have done everything you're supposed to do. He's a cool kid. He's just an independent thinker. Give him a minute, and sure enough, he's doing great. He's working really well. He's fantastic, doing a job that he loves. I don't understand exactly why it ended up the way it did, because I did teach him not to run. I taught him to run away from fires, and now he runs toward them. But other than that, like, he has a noble, regular job. He's never even borrowed money from me, which I think is kind of cool, right? I don't know. But for that moment, I needed somebody to tell me, this is not the end of the world. Your child's not. I mean, he's sick. He's not just laying on the couch for no reason. And yeah, it has to be mono, but whatever. If it didn't have that nickname, it would be less embarrassing. It's not exactly a Facebook, everybody's all, yay, my child's going to Harvard, Stanford, my child has mono, Spiritually, we can get exhausted too. Part of it is from maybe being too far away, from not praying, not reading our Bible, not being in fellowship. And that can cause a thirst, right? Where you're just kind of spiritually starving, and that can make you super tired. But I don't want you to feel like if you're tired, that necessarily means you're so far from God, he's not going to take care of you. Sometimes you're doing so much for God, so much that you could also be in a position where you are tired. And I used to work at a church, and I used to always look at people with this horrible judgment. I'll just totally be like, well, if you don't have time for God, then you're not going to have, you clearly don't have your priorities straight. And I would just want to, first of all, repent for having that attitude and maybe even making people feel like that. And secondly, I want to remind you that your service to God is something special that he has aside for you that you can partake in when you're able. It's okay if you haven't been able to sleep in a long time and you just cannot go and hold babies in the nursery every single Sunday. That's okay. As soon as you can, you should do it, of course, if that's what you're called to do. You don't want to be far from that for a long time because you're missing out on blessings. But it's intended to be a blessing. Just imagine if I had my littles and I had baked them these amazing cupcakes, I don't know, some Pinterest cuppy cake of some sort, and I put them out in front of them and they all started crying, but I'm too full, I don't want to eat it. I'd be like, it's okay, you ate your dinner. You can have the cupcakes later. We can put them aside. I wanted them to be your pleasure. I didn't want you to be like choking them down. I wanted you to enjoy them, and I feel like that's how God feels about service. Like if it's the one more thing that's going to kill you, yes, look and make sure there's nothing else that you can give up, especially if you really enjoy it. But if you're just miserable, just take a break. Come back. It's all right. You don't need the burden of serving out of this obligation. It is intended to be a gift for you, to be able to be a part of the good work that God does, and it's fantastic to be able to do it. But if it's killing you, it's all right to say no. Even to serving, even to taking a meal to the sick when you're like, I can't even cook for myself. Can I just order a pizza? Is that all right? That's okay. It's okay not to participate in the fundraiser. You could write a check. This is something that I learned way late. And you guys, seriously, this is what the public schools are going to do to you, and maybe even private schools too. They're going to tout out all this junky junk, and they're going to tell your kids it's the best stuff that they've ever seen, and if they just sell all of the things, they can get this tiny little Dollar Tree rubber ducky that is magical and will solve all their problems if they just go to all of their neighbors and write down all their email addresses and sell all of the things. You don't have to do it. You can let's go to the Dollar Tree. Give your kids $5, say knock themselves out, and go home and not sell any of the dumb wrapping paper. You can write a check right to the school and say, here, I'd like to donate I would buy $50 worth of wrapping paper. Here's $30. That would be way more than your profit was ever going to be. And I'm going to go sit on the couch and watch This Is Us. I'm just saying, there are better things to do with your life. If you love it, do it. Like, it feels great. Some of you are out there like selling the whatever, and it gives you life. There's no shame in that. But for some of us who feel like it is dragging the life out of us and we're screaming at our kid, come on, go up, knock on the door, ask your aunt. You can say no. Find the rest in taking out the things that you don't need so that you have time for the things that you do need. Everything, and this is advice I've heard from several different sources, but I don't think that it matters who the source is because it's so great. Everything you say yes to means you're saying no to something else. Everything. So if I say yes, I'll sell the fundraising wrapping paper, cookies, whatever. If I say yes, I'm doing that, what am I saying no to? Am I saying no to a nap? Am I saying no to story time? Am I saying no to whatever? Or do I have that time and I'm saying no to some free time that I wasn't doing anything anyway? Or maybe, you gotta weigh it out and say, what am I saying no to when I say yes? And sometimes it's worth it. There are plenty of times when I have said, it is totally worth not getting sleep. I'm staying up late to do this thing. It's totally worth not being, not spending a little bit of time with my children because I need to get out with my girlfriends. For a long time, when our children were small, a group of us would get together every year for a girls' trip. We would save up our money all throughout the year. Every time I would go to the grocery store, I'd get cash back and then put that cash in a jar. And then we would use this to go on a girls' trip. We went crazy places like Palm Springs. Actually, I think we rented a house in Indio. We also went to like Cape Cod. We went to Seattle. We went to Amish country. We did this amazing thing. We'd rent a house and we'd all chip in and we'd hang out together. And every time we'd tell people, people would go, oh, I wish I could do that. Here's the thing. We saved for it. We scrimped for it. We took as cheap possible vacations. In the beginning, we were like going in the offiest off-season. That time when we went to Indio, we rented that house for like $400 for the week. We all chipped in. We chipped together the dollars. We drove out there. We did everything we could to save money. We went in the middle of, it was 121 one day. But it had a saltwater pool, and half of us didn't even have bathing suits. We're just like, we're jumping in there, and we're just laying there and saying no words for a while. But people kept saying to us, like, well, I wish I could do that. Well, why can't you? What is the reason that you can't? Is there somebody that you could trade with so that they could keep your child for a little while and you could go? Is there some way that you could just have it at somebody's house and just put all the people at one place? Is there a way that you can do it so that you can get away even for a day or a night where you can just care about you? And while we were there, we didn't just care about ourselves, we cared about each other, which is also nourishing. We didn't just care about each other, we cared about what God had in our lives. We prayed over each other, we prayed for each other, we confessed things. We said things like, the bra that I'm wearing right now, I haven't washed since I can remember. And we all said, girl, take it off right now. We're going to go throw it in for you. We had these things so we could take care of each other. We could say, yes, you're doing fine. Keep going. It's hard for me too. And nowadays, these same girls and we have the app Marco Polo. Does anybody do this? It's kind of like a Snapchat-y thing, but I'm too old. I didn't figure out Snapchat, so I just skipped right to Marco Polo. You just record little videos, and you leave them there, and then you can be in a little group. So all of us will come in. We check in every single morning. As silly as it sounds, we like, I can't get out of bed. Do you think that this will count as a smoky eye, We do. Hey, my teenager did this thing. Is this normal? My husband is making me, how do I say this to him? We have this conversation every single day, and it takes a couple of minutes of our time, but it makes a lifetime of difference for this idea of mentoring each other, encouraging each other. How can I pray for you? How can I be there for you? Somebody was just recently saying, I feel so unseen. I feel like nobody sees what I do or how hard I'm working to do it. And we all just cried with her for a little while, and then we lifted her up, and then we made jokes, and then we went back into work, and we came back again, and we check on her. We do these things because that sisterhood makes a big difference. And if you could find some people, even if they're not close, I've got one in Virginia and one in Washington, and we're all over the place, but we just check in with each other, see how they're doing. And this is a good group to start with that. Just this little check-in. How are you doing? Are you okay? Are you feeling seen? What do you need? And God uses that. He uses that in our lives. He says to us, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." Remember all those heavy burdens we were talking about in the beginning, that responsibility, the commitments, the guilt, all of those things. God says that we can come to him and he will give us rest. And I truly believe that part of the way that he gives us rest is in girlfriends. And in friends can say, "Hey, you know what? Let me carry that for you for a minute. It's too heavy. Let's do that together." And part of that way is through reading the scripture. Part of that way is through listening to worship songs. Part of that way is through prayer. And part of that way is through fellowship. So being a part of a group like this, I know that it's hard, and it only gets harder trying to find the time to come, right? Do you ever find this? Like everybody is sleeping in on the day you're supposed to come. Or you can't find any shoes for anybody in any combination. And there's always something that interrupts, but I would just implore you to make it a priority. Make being with people that will let you be who you are created to be. Make that be a priority, because that is where you get that rest. Does anybody else leave these things like, even if it hits the fan right as you, and often it does, right as you walk out the door? Recently, I wrote a book and I got a really nice check for it. And it was just like, I am buying myself a new computer. I can't wait. I had it in my hand. I was Googling which one to get. And then my car was in the shop. I had kind of forgotten about that. And I'm, what computer am I going to get? And I say to my husband, because he's a computer guy, I'm like, "Does this look good?" He's like, "Yeah." I go, "I think I'm just going to order it." And then the phone rings. I'm like, "Oh, it's the shop." And I hand it to my husband, because we're sexist like that. You handle the cars and the computers. I got the other stuff. And he gets on and he's like, okay. And how much? The exact amount of the check. And I just saw, it's my computer. I was so sad about it. And it took me a full 20 minutes, I'm not going to lie, to remind myself how happy I was that I had that money to be able to pay for my car, because I really need a car. And not think of it as, I didn't get the thing that I wanted. And sometimes I think that it's the same way with rest. Like you get this rest and then a crisis happens and you're like, I didn't get to do anything exciting with all this new energy that I got. But sometimes we just need to be thankful that little bit of rest gave us what we needed to be able to deal with this next thing, this next crisis, this next blowout, this next battle over what we're eating, or this next tantrum, or this next family crisis, or whatever the case may be. You have to be rested so you're ready for those things, not just when you crash, because at that point you're too far beyond. You have to kind of build that up the same way as the trip that I was talking about. You have to save up the little bits as you go, taking little moments, taking those breaths, getting your children to bed on time, getting them down for nap, giving yourself a little bit of space so you can have that rest, talking to the ladies as often as you can, getting that rest. And then as you're continually coming to Jesus, he will give you the rest that you need in the emergencies when you just have passed your store, right?